Hi Summit, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we'll be learning how to make this beautiful shirt, but the unique part of this shirt is that it has a cow neck design. That's this cow effect at the back. Yes, as you can see right here, this cow effect at the back is actually what makes this unique, and this is the essence of this tutorial. So if this looks like what you like to learn, then you need to watch this video to the very end. My name is Veronica Adams Eze. Welcome to Vera Adams YouTube channel. Without wasting time, let's get started. So right here is the pattern paper that we'll be using. I'm going ahead to mark from shoulder line to the bust line 10 inches. I'm going to also go ahead to mark from shoulder line to hip line, which is 24 inches. I'll roll the lines and I can start imputing the measurements. On this starting line, I'll go ahead and impute half of my shoulder measurement, and then from there I'll determine the length of the sleeve. So I'm using 8.5 here, and I'm adding 2 inches for the hem of the sleeve. You can do as much as you want depending on the fabric that you have. I'm going down by 1.5 inches for the slope, and here I mark 3 inches for the neck width and 2.5 inches for the neck depth. Once this is done, I'll go ahead to connect from the neck width right into the 1.5 inches shoulder slope. Once this is done, I'll move ahead to take the bust measurement right on this bust line. So I'm marking a quarter of the bust measurement, and I'm adding 2.5 inches for 2 inches rather for seam allowance. So whatever I have here, that's the shoulder measurement, the sleeve measurement, and the allowance. I'm going to go ahead to mark it right on this bust line as well. So I'll connect right from this shoulder slope right to meet that bust line. I'll then move on to the hip line and go ahead to mark quarter of the hip measurement, which is 9 2/4. I'll go ahead and add 2 inches also for seam allowance. So at this point I realized I didn't mark the waistline, so I'm going to go ahead to mark from the shoulder line 16 inches downwards, and that will represent the waistline. So once I'm done marking, I'll go ahead to take the measurement. The waist measurement I'm working with is 26 inches. 26 inches divided by 4 will give us 6.5. So I'll also go ahead to add seam allowance as well. Now that this is done, I'll go ahead and connect right from the hip line to meet the waistline, then to meet the bust line, just as you're seeing me doing here. So because I don't want this place to be so straight, I'm going to go ahead and curve it inwards, just as you're seeing me doing here. Now that this is done, I've gone ahead to use marker pen to highlight it so that it becomes more visible. So here I'm going ahead to also create the neckline for the back. That means I came down by 1 inch for the back depth. So at this point I'm going to go ahead to cut it out. I started cutting from the bottom right to the sides. So once we're done cutting out, we can now go ahead and alter this pattern to get our cow effect. So we'll be using this pattern paper to cut out both the front and the back. So but first we're going to be working on creating the cow effect. So right here you need to be sure that what you have at that part is going to be okay for your curve. So you need to measure your curve or the curve of your client. So right on the bust line, I'm going to go ahead to slash this pattern open, but not completely. Please note that you should not cut it out completely. So now that I've gone ahead to do that, you can then extend this slash depending on how much fabric you have. So right here I have about 1.5 yards of fabric. So and this is what I'm going to be using to make this top. I actually made a trouser to go with it, but for this tutorial it's going to be just on the top. So right here I've gone ahead to fold the fabric, as you can see, and I'm placing the pattern paper right on it. But before I did that, I went ahead to mark from the folded part. I went ahead to mark 1.5 inches, and this was supposed to represent the button allowance. But the mistake I made here was that I assumed the button allowance was going to fall on the back piece. Anyways, I'm still going to correct that later on. Just let us go ahead with the tutorial. So right here at the point where the 1.5 inches for the button stopped, I went ahead to place the pattern paper. While I was working on this pattern paper, I actually cut it off totally, but try as much as possible not to do that to yours. So right here I'm trying to adjust the paper to make sure that it's, even though it's separated completely, that everything is still aligning well. So as you can see what I'm doing here, so I'm also trying to spread open that slash. So depending on how much fabric you're willing to use or how much fabric you have, you can do as much as you want. But for here, I think 7 inches, I just want to do 7 inches. So you can do below and you can do above. So at that point where I have 7 inches, I went ahead to pin the upper part of this paper down, as you're seeing me doing here. After spreading the upper part, I realized that the fabric was not enough on this side to accommodate the length of the sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead to reduce that later on. But let's move on to this part. So decide if you want to add a lining to this. So if you want to add a lining to this, just trace from this neckline into the fold, just as I'm illustrating right here. But if you do not want to add a lining, like I do not want to add a lining to this, so I'm going to go ahead and extend this upward, just as you're seeing me doing. If you don't understand what I'm saying, just watch what I'm doing right here, following the chalk. I'm sorry that the chalk is not so visible, but you would understand this when I start cutting it out. So right here I'll start cutting out and I'll follow the lines that I made with the chalk. So at the end you realize that we have like sort of a triangular shape. So the essence of this is to avoid the use of lining. So anyways, I'll move on to cutting out the side of this top. And when I get to the sleeve region, I'll make sure to reduce this, since the material we have here cannot accommodate the original full length of the sleeve. So I've gone ahead to do that, as you can see right here. So guys, it was at this point that I realized that I was actually adding the space for button allowance to the back, which is supposed to be for the front bodies. I got carried away, so it was here that I realized it. So I'll go ahead and push the pattern paper to the center, just as you're seeing me doing here, so that we have the excesses on the side. So I'm also checking for the upper part of this piece. It really did not affect the upper part, so it's actually okay. So the part that just affected is the sides, which I'll go ahead and trim off. Right here I'll go ahead and notch the neck width. Yes, where we have the neck width on the pattern paper, make sure that you notch this area. It is actually very important. So once that part is notched, you pull down the other parts and this would form the cowl effect. So I'm just showing us how it will look like at the end. So moving on to cutting out the front piece. Remember that the front piece is the one that has the button and the button holes. Right here I'll only be cutting out one piece for the front. Once I'm done with this, I can use it to cut out the other piece. This is just to minimize fabric, or manage fabric rather. So you can use a tape to hold this piece together so that it becomes one piece. But right here I don't have a tape to work with, so I'm using the scissors to hold it in place. This space you're seeing right here is 1.5 inches, and it is actually necessary for the button and the button holes for the front pieces. So right from that 1.5 inches, I'm going to create a notch, and this indicates where the button allowance ends. So once I'm done cutting this, I'll go ahead and use this piece to cut out the second piece for the front. So the second piece for the front, I actually had to join around the sleeve area because the fabric was not enough. Really, I had to manage at this point. I'm going to show you the second piece. Here's the second piece that I had to join around the sleeve area, as you can see right here. So this is the front pieces, and the neck depth that I used here is 2.5 inches. Note that I already went ahead to add soft gum stay on the allowance that we created for the button and the button hole. So I'm going to pick one piece of this and I'm going to start folding right from the bottom of this piece to the top region. Just watch as I am doing this. So I'll pin this down. I'll take it to the sewing machine to stitch it down. I'll also go ahead and bring the second piece and then repeat the same process right from the bottom to the top, making sure that the fold stops exactly at the point which we notched. Just watch as I'm doing this part and you understand it. I've gone ahead to stitch down, and this is what it looks like. The next thing to do right now is to bring in the back piece, and here's the back piece. So I'm going ahead to unfold it, and this is what it is looking like even without stitching down. So remember the parts where we notched while we were working with the pattern paper. I'll go ahead and attach this front piece on that part of the back piece, and from that part, now notched part, I'm going to start pinning down till I get to the very end of both pieces. I'll go ahead and repeat the same process for the other side of the front and the back pieces. So I'm bringing in the second piece for the front, and I'm attaching it starting from that notched area on the back piece, and I'll go ahead to start pinning down. Make sure that right side of both pieces are facing each other, and I'll go ahead and stitch down with 1/2 inch. So this is what it looks like after I went ahead to stitch down on the shoulder line. So the excess that you see here, that's what is in the middle of both shoulder lines that we just stitch right now, will be for the cowl effect. So the next thing is to close up the sides, and that means I have to fold this part just as you're seeing me doing, and I'm using chalk to illustrate how I'm going to be stitching down right from the sleeve opening till I get to the side and to the hem of the stop. So I'm going to go ahead to stitch down with 1 inch from the sleeve opening to the hem of this. I'm going to repeat the same process for the other side as well. Now this is what we have after I went ahead to stitch down. So this is the stitch, yes, right, running from the sleeve area to the hem of this top. So, and this is what it looks like on the right side. Here is the front, and I'm going to show you what the back looks like. So now we can go ahead to work on the collar. So the best way to do this is to bring in the initial pattern paper. This is the upper part of this pattern paper. Remember that we already created the neckline for the front and the back, so you can go ahead and measure it. So I'll start measuring first for the front, then I'll go ahead to measure for the back. So in total I have 8 inches. So I first measured for the front. I had about 4.5 and 2/4. Then I continued from that 4.5 and 2/4 to measure round for the back. So in total I had 8 inches. That's 8 inches times 2 will give us 16 inches. That means the neckline measurement I'm using right here will be 16 inches. For this collar, I'll be making use of thick gum stay. So I'm going ahead to fold, and on the fold I would have at least nothing less than 8.5 inches. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line to serve as like a starting line. On this line, I'm going to go ahead to mark the 8 inches that we need. That would be the base of the collar. You know, there's a base, there's the upper part of the collar. I hope you understand. So the base that I want, that's the height of the base I want, is 1 inch. So that's why I'm going ahead to mark 1 inch all around. So I'll connect this together. Once that is done, working on the upper part of the collar, I want to remove 1 inch from the width of this base. So I'm going to go ahead to mark 1 inch. While I was doing this, I think my camera stopped recording at a point, so but I'll try as much as possible to explain what I did here. So once I went ahead to mark 1 inch here, that means I would have 7 inches left. At that point, I came up by 3 inches for the height of the upper piece of the collar. So for the center, I'll go up by 2.5 inches. Later I realized that this 2.5 inches was too much, so I went ahead to reduce it to 2 inches. So you can do 2.5 inches if it's fine by you. So but right here I'm doing 2 inches, and from that part I'm using my hand to connect it. If you have a curve rule, you can go ahead and use that, but I don't have one available right here. So for this part, in order to ensure that this collar slips perfectly, I went out by 1/2 inch from the initial line that we made. You can either have the collar base as straight or curved, so but I want it to be a bit curved, so I went in by 0.25 inch and I curved it inwards, just as you're seeing me doing. So now the next thing to do is to go ahead and cut it out. Note that what we're trying to do here is to create a one piece kind of collar. That means you will not be slashing this in the middle, so we just want a cut together collar. Yes, cut together collar. So I'll go ahead and fold this fabric as you're seeing me doing here, and then I'll place the collar right on top of it. Make sure that the shining part, there are two parts of the collar, the dull part and the shining part. The shining part is the part that fuses to the fabric, so I'm placing the shining part on the fabric. I'll go ahead and press it down. Right here I've gone ahead to press it down. Make sure that when you're doing this, you have at least about half an inch all around the edges. If you notice right here, the down part, I've gone ahead to fold it right on the collar, but the other part is still laying flat. So the next thing to do is, while that part is still being folded in, go ahead and run a stitch from that end, making sure that you are sewing very close to the collar stay, and go ahead to start stitching right from that end till you get to this other end. Just watch as I am illustrating with the pen. Make sure that that part is folded in when you continue sewing on that edge. So I've gone ahead to sew everything down, but before I go ahead to turn it inside out, I'll go ahead and run a stitch right on that part where we folded the fabric to meet the stay. Yes, so right here I'm going ahead to cut off the excesses. Once I'm done, I'll come to show us how I've gone ahead to run a stitch. So this is the part I was saying we had to go ahead and run a stitch before going ahead to stitch all this part together. But before I go ahead to turn inside out, this other part where we didn't fold inwards, I've gone ahead to press it inwards, just as you're seeing me doing here. Now I can go ahead and turn this inside out. Make sure that you notch the sharp edges. Now that we have it turned out, I'll go ahead and give it a good press so that everything is sitting well. So the next thing to do right now is to go ahead and bring in the main bodice so that we can couple it to the collar. So for this type of style, the collar is only going to be sitting on the front neckline, that is the two front neckline, but we're going to be avoiding the back because the back is where we have the cowl effect. So I've gone ahead to start putting the front neckline in between the collar. Yes, the collar that we already prepared, making sure that it ends at that notch. You know, the area where we notched on the back piece, that's where the stitching for this collar is going to end. So take note of that. An alternate way of doing this is to just place the neckline, that's the front neckline, just pin it to the the part of the collar where we first ironed down and we stitched on top. Just place it right on it, just as you're seeing me doing. So just the bodies, that's the front piece, just place it on that part of the collar. Then you can now go ahead and fold this other end, the one that we eventually used iron to fold. That's the second folding. Just go ahead and then fold this other part on it, making sure that you're stopping at the point where we have that notch on the back piece. Then you can continue sewing just as I am illustrating here. I'm going to go ahead and use pin to hold this down so that I can continue with the other part. So watch what I'm doing here. So you go ahead and place that part of the front, place it in between the collar, just as you're seeing me doing here. Then you pin it down. Then just about half of an inch of the main bodies, go ahead and start placing it right on top of the initial part of the collar that we folded and we stitched on. So go ahead and start pinning till you get to that notch that you have on the back piece. That shows us where the sewing of the collar is going to stop. Then once you've gotten to that point, then you can now start stitching without the back piece. That means you continue with stitching right on the collar. If you don't understand how I'm explaining, just make sure that you're watching what I am doing carefully. watch what I am doing. I think you best understand if you just watch the way that I am illustrating. So at this point, you go ahead and start sewing, yes, and then you avoid the back, because that's the essence of creating the notch around that area. So this is what we have after I went ahead to stitch this part down. So the next thing to do is, if you have a serger, go ahead and serge round that part of the back that would form that cowl effect. So once you're done with this, you can now move ahead to create a top stitch around this collar end, starting from that collar base to the other side, just as I have illustrated here. So then you can now go ahead and fold the collar into two like this and give it a good press so that it stands well. So I've gone ahead to do just that, and this is what I have. So now you can see the cowl effect in its full glory. So this is how it will be sitting on your back or on the back of your client, and this is what the collar will be looking like. So you can agree with me if I say this is a bit technical, but it's really no big deal as long as you pay optimum attention and then you follow suit and you do exactly as it's been said in this video. So if you found this video useful, please do not forget to give it a thumbs up by clicking on the like button. And if this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. Do well to subscribe. I post useful content weekly. If you feel this video was way too fast for you, I'm so sorry. It's just that this video actually takes a very long time. In fact, I think we have over 20 minutes here, and recently I've been finding it very hard to upload videos that are longer than 10 minutes. So I apologize for this, but just go over it and I'm sure that you would understand. So for the bottom of this shirt, I actually made it such that the bottom is, or the back is actually like an inch longer than that of the front. So you can do it however you want to do. Please note that for a female shirt, the right side usually covers the left side. That means the right side is where you have the button holes and the left side is where you have the buttons. I hope you understand this. So at this point, we've come to the end of this tutorial. I really hope that you did find it useful. Please do not keep this video to yourself. Share to friends and family that also sew it. Until I see you in my next video, bye.